Welcome everyone to Tracer Burnout. I'm Roger.
And I'm Dan.
And today we're filming a special Memorial Day edition of the show. Brief history, Memorial Day initially was called Decoration Day in the wake of the Civil War. Over the decades, it would take on a couple different iterations after World War I and also II. And then in 1971, the federal government officially recognized it as a holiday that we understand it today.
Yep. In 1929, Congress passed a law compensating the wives and mothers of those who had lost their lives in combat. In 1945, the Gold Star Wives of America was founded. Now we recognize all immediate family members as Gold Star family, both those that were killed in action and those that were killed in training.
So military family members serve in their own way. And so today we're going to be having our discussion with Gold Star spouse, Mrs. Jessica Hess.
Hi, how
Hi.
are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Every day's an adventure. Thank you for agreeing to sit down with us.
Of course.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, so please tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Jessica. I have 3 daughters, 2 stepdaughters. I grew up in a small town in Illinois, but it was close enough to St. Louis that I pretty much tell everyone I'm from St. Louis. No one's ever heard of my small town in Illinois. Very Midwestern, like salt of the earth type blue collar people. I grew up with my dad and stepmom and step siblings who I'm really close with. But
What did your dad do for a living?
my dad worked at a Ford plant, and that's what he did all through my childhood. Yeah.
Okay, brothers and sisters?
Like I said, step siblings. I have 2 stepbrothers and a stepsister. Yeah. One of my stepbrothers is younger by 2 years, and then the other ones are older, significantly older. I think 7 and 9 years. So we grew up together, but not really together. They lived with their dad.
Okay, so we ask all of our guests about family histories of, we'll say service, not necessarily military service. So did you have any extended family members or maybe grandparents that had served in that capacity?
Yeah, so my dad did not. My grandfather did. He served in the Korean era. I think he missed the war, but he was stationed in Germany in the time. One of the coolest veterans in my family, my great uncle was in World War II. He was in the Navy, and he was a gunner's mate. But really cool story. His brother was also in the Navy, and he was at Pearl Harbor, and he was, the story that I was told, he was on a ship that was near the Arizona. So when the Arizona was bombed and sunk, he was like blown off his ship that was nearby, and he was MIA, but he was alive. And then he survived the war and got out of the Navy, and then he ended up joining the Army during the Korean War and was KIA in Korea. So I never met him, but yeah, I did see the telegram there. So my great aunt, that would have been her brother-in-law, she had the telegram that said he was MIA at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and then she had the telegram that said he was found. So, yeah.
One of the old yellow Western Union cards?
Yes, yep. I remember it being that, and like old and yellowy and frayed and clearly typed, typewriter typed. Yep, absolutely.
Yep, people used to dread opening their mailbox.
Oh, yeah,
because of that.
For sure.
What's the movie?
We Were Soldiers.
We Were Soldiers. Yeah. They
yeah.
did a really good job depicting that.
Yes.
I mean, obviously that was Vietnam.
I have not watched that movie since my husband died, because that's like absolutely knock on the door trigger for sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Jacob, how did you guys meet?
We met through, so Jake and I were both previously married. My ex was in the 82nd with Jake. And that's how we met. We met a long time ago, and I won't deep dive. I'll just say that my ex sucked and his ex sucked, and we both got a divorce. And I messaged him, or he messaged me and asked me a question, and kind of like that was the end of it. And then later on, he messaged me again and like picked the conversation back up, even though it was over. So I knew, and it was kind of like, hey, how are you doing type thing. Mm-hmm. And he pursued me for months, and I was like, oh, you're not my type. No, it's weird because, like I said, I knew him. I knew him for years. I knew his ex, and he knew my ex, and I thought it would be weird. And he was like, it won't be weird. It'll be fine. And finally I gave him a chance, and it was the best decision of my life. So, yeah. And by the way, it wasn't weird.
Was there something specific that he did or said that made you finally relent?
Just, I think, his persistence, and he was, like, super adorable. But, yeah. Because I always told him, like, you're not my type. Like, I can just tell. And he just was very, very persistent. Yeah, very persistent. So,
well, I mean, those are good traits in many things, whether it be a military career or pursuing a potential mate.
Yeah. Made me laugh, and so I gave him a chance, and there you go.
So let's talk about his family background, kind of his growing up. So where was he from? Military service in his family, etc.
Yeah, so Jake was from the Kansas City area. He's from a small town called Grandview, which it's just a couple blocks from Kansas City, Missouri. Grew up with his mom and dad. He had 2 younger sisters. This is significant. When Jake was 13, his younger sister Kristen was 11. And his mom had just had his baby sister, who I think she was 6 weeks old maybe, and his younger sister Kristen was electrocuted in a horrible accident. Jake was 13, and that affected him for the rest of his life. That was like very, very traumatizing for him. He ended up, when he had his first daughter with his previous wife, he named his oldest daughter Kristen after his sister. But,
that's sweet.
Yeah. So Jake's dad was in the military in the 80s before Jake was born, maybe the late 70s, I can't remember. Did 3 years. I think he was stationed in Germany as well, got out of the army. Then Jake's parents got married, and Jake was born. And he was very close with his grandparents and his paternal grandparents, and they lived right down the road from him. And they were actually, his grandfather was his best man at our wedding, and his grandmother was my matron of honor.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so he was very close with them. Super cool story about his family and his dad. So when Jake joined the army, he was getting ready to go. Well, Jake's father, by the way, he never deployed. It wasn't a wartime, I don't think. So when Jake got word that he was going to Iraq with the 82nd Airborne, he came home for leave and, told his dad, well, Dad, I'm going to get to go to, combat theater, and what do you think about that? And his dad said something to the effect of, man, I really wish I would have been able to do that. If I could join the army and I would do it. And Jake was like, well, Dad, you can, because you have prior service, so they'll take a couple of years off. His dad went and joined, I think, the National Guard, joined the army at 40-something years old when his son was getting ready to go to Iraq with the 82nd, and was in country before Jake.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. So they were actually in
Beat
Iraq.
Ya.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
So they were in Iraq together.
Nice.
Not in the same place, but they were in country together. So, my mother-in-law, she's awesome. She's buried 2 children, and she was an Army wife and an Army mom at the same time. And interestingly, my father-in-law has tried to explain it to me before, but I know the National Guard and the Reserves, they're so different from active duty as far as how they organize and who they fall under command-wise. But his dad was under, again, National Guard, was under some type of a CA command, like overall. I'll have to let you guys know later. I wish I knew this information, but I just thought it was really neat because at the time when they were deployed together, CA was not on Jake's mind at all. He was an engineer at the time. So
the vast majority of civil affairs and psychological operations are actually on the reserve side, approximately 90%. And those commands are very, very massive. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's just something cool, like a little link there. But I love that story.
So there was bragging rights about who got to go downrange first.
Apparently,
that's good.
Jake was all like, "Oh, you never got to go, and I'm going to get to go to Iraq," and his dad was like, hold my beer.
Fair enough. Do you know during that time when they were both stationed or when they were both deployed to Iraq together, did they have any sort of communication? Were they able to get together at all? Obviously, it was a large theater, but
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not for sure. I'll have to ask my mother-in-law or my father-in-law. Yeah.
That would have been pretty cool. What year was that? 07, 08. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or maybe
it's the same time I was there.
06. Yeah. something like that. So I want to say he graduated airborne school in 2006. So yeah, maybe 2007. Yeah.
So you said he was an engineer. Is that what he wanted to do? Are you aware of when he went to see the recruiter, or did he already have kind of an idea?
So he joined the Army. He did not join right out of high school. He actually went to a trade school. He went to school to be a mechanic. And he told me that he hated working on other people's cars. And I've heard that before. My dad worked at Ford, and he didn't like working on cars either. And, his own was different. But he told me that working on other people's cars stressed him out. So he was in the reserves. And so he joined the Army officially, the reserves, in 2004. And then he ended up going active duty later on. But I don't know why he chose engineer. But so he, like I said, he went active duty, became an engineer, reclassed from whatever he was in the reserves, got stationed with the 82nd. That was a conversation he never told me either why he wanted to be airborne, but I mean, my guess is just the adventure of it, right?
Why does anybody want to do
Why
that?
does anybody want to jump on airplanes? Perfectly good airplane, I don't know. He just didn't want to be called a leg forever, I guess. But
Fair enough.
I do know why he went CA, though. He told me that being an engineer was going to get him killed. So he went CA. Because whenever he was in Iraq for both of those deployments, he went to Iraq twice with the 82nd. He was doing a lot of route clearance, as engineers have historically done forever and ever. I do think he liked being an engineer. I think he liked his job. But he said it was going to end up getting me killed.
Yep.
And CA at the time was recruiting very heavily. So he thought it was a better opportunity and a way for him to grow in the Army. And I'm very proud of him for doing what he did and going CA, because I know that there's a selection and a qualification course and then language and all of the training. And I know it takes like a very special breed of soldier to go through that. So, yeah.
So active duty, civil affairs, psychological operations, and special forces all go through their own version of a qualification course, assessment, selection.
Yeah.
Everybody also gets assigned a language, and so you told us before the show that he had Mandarin Chinese, which is very difficult to get that language because you have to test highly on the aptitude battery in order to get that. So can you tell us just a little bit about his Chinese skill?
Yeah, so he had made offhand remarks sometimes about, like, I don't know why I tested so high, because Mandarin's very difficult, and like kind of a joke and like a joke on himself, because I've heard that yes, if you test very high, you're going to get Mandarin or Arabic, right? So he got Mandarin Chinese. His Chinese skills were okay.
Passable.
They were passable. I have a notebook where he had been practicing. I think you guys have to renew it or something like that.
Every year.
Yeah. Every year, yeah. So he was preparing for that. And he was writing down stories or something like that. And I have this notebook where he had written down like our wedding story in Mandarin. And he basically said, my wife and I got married in Montana. It was so beautiful. She was so beautiful. Something to that effect. My grandparents were there, but all in Mandarin. So that was really interesting for me to see. And then also in the notebook, I saw like type of military language, but then also things, just simple things like, my name is Jake. I'm an American. Where are you from? Things like that.
It's conversational.
Conversational that you would, need to know if you're having a conversation in country. But yes, he spoke Mandarin.
Did he ever try to show off? Like you and some friends go out to dinner to a Chinese place and he would try to show off?
No, but he did tell me one time he was in, I'm not sure where, somewhere in the Pacific. He may have been in Guam actually, and there was people speaking Mandarin.
Oh, yeah.
And yes.
Oh, yeah.
I think he was in Guam, and he said there were people speaking Mandarin in the elevator, and someone said something about the fat American. Talking about him. And he was not fat by any means, but he was significantly bigger than the other man, I guess, being 6 foot tall and 220. But he just kind of laughed, and then he also told me that he passed through Hong Kong and he picked up or understood a lot of Chinese there too, and Yeah. Yeah. But no, he didn't try to show off. I do recall him saying, I really hope it's not a cuss word, but he'd say Jindama. And I think it means really, or like what, or something like that. But I don't think it's a cuss word because he had the kids saying it too. But like the kids would do something silly and he'd be like, Jindama. So I don't know. I hope if you guys get any comments like that, I gotta do some research. And then he taught me, I think Migwaran means America, and Shingbaku means Starbucks. And that's it. That's all I know. I hope
all right,
that's
I'm
right.
not going to research that one. Okay.
But yeah, no bragging. No bragging.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, he'd have to take his test every year and all that. So, so he was in a civil affairs battalion that was generally operating in and out of the Asian theater. We call it U.S. Indo-PACOM. So what other kind of missions was he doing while he was going downrange?
CA specifically? I know his last deployment in 2018, he traveled around quite a bit. He started in Guam, and then he ended up going, and these places that he was at, he wasn't there for very long. He was there temporarily, but he started in Guam. He was there for a while, went a whole bunch of places, and then ended in the Philippines, and he was there for the end for several months. But I think mostly the one that sticks out though is Cambodia. In Cambodia, I know that he helped to like set up schools and get like fresh water and things like that to these like remote villages all across Cambodia. And from what he said, everyone really liked them and appreciated that they were there. Of course, a lot of his time in Cambodia was spent in Phnom Penh, where he worked out of the embassy and was wearing a suit and tie. And then one time he said that a Cambodian princess was coming to a party, and I was like, what? And he was like, really? You really think she's going to be interested in me? Which, of course, I was like, yeah, you're like the best looking guy there, of course.
Naturally.
But I think it was, I think being civil affairs is awesome because you do have the opportunity to go and represent your country and show other countries like, hey, we're good guys. We're here to help. We can do these things for you and things like that. And I think it takes a special type of person like Jake was to be able to have not only the courage, but, whenever you're deployed like that, you don't go in, it's not like Iraq or Afghanistan where you go in with a giant brigade or a division or a battalion. It's not hundreds and hundreds of soldiers. Right. It's small teams, 4 and 5 man teams going on these missions. And, sometimes it can be dangerous when you're traveling like that. Sometimes it's dangerous for just the average person traveling. Yeah. So I think it's takes a special type of person, and he got to kind of showcase like how special he was and how he was able to speak with people and be respectful and build those relationships, and he was likable, and I think that's important too. So yeah, traveling around, meeting people, being a representative of our country.
Giving a different perspective from what most people probably think of with the U.S. military.
I'm sorry?
Giving a different perspective or a different viewpoint of what most people think of with the U.S. military.
Think most people think guns and war and uniforms and, Iraq, Afghanistan, and it is that. It's all of that.
Of course. Yeah.
But it is a lot more too. A lot of what especially special operations specifically we do is I say we as in Americans, the American military, is they go in and they build relationships and they build bonds with people who could later be our allies or hopefully will be our allies, and we help. And I know there's things about America, the peacekeepers. Well, absolutely, we're the peacekeepers. Why wouldn't we be? And so part of what CA does is they go and they build those relationships and they say, how can we help you? And get to know the people, and yeah.
What's important, so in the event that things actually do start to escalate, we're not starting from zero.
That's true too, yeah. So, I mean, frankly, yes, going and building those relationships also allows us to be in those countries if something were to happen.
Exactly.
It allows us to have, maybe like a place to stay or an apartment or a front there, kind of like Germany, what Germany does for us in Europe. Same thing.
Yeah.
So throughout his suit and tie adventures, Did he bring back anything interesting?
Yes. Oh man. So Jake collected masks from all over. A lot of these countries, I guess, do masks. I don't know. So he brought back tons of masks. And some of them I don't even remember where they're from. I wish I had written them down because he would have been able to tell me. But I collect Christmas ornaments, and of course a lot of these countries do not celebrate Christmas. They're
Right.
Buddhist countries or whatever. So he would just find anything that you could hang, usually keychains. So, and then of course he brought back money for the girls and scarves and all kind. I mean, he spoiled us. Like, he spoiled us all the time. Yeah, brought back lots of things, yeah.
That's cool. I mean, that's what most soldiers do, right? Whenever they go somewhere else, they tend to bring something back home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges of just being either a girlfriend or even a military spouse of somebody who's kind of coming and going, deploying, training. Kind of what's that like day to day?
Well, if you have children together, that's, for me, definitely challenging, or has been one of the biggest challenges, is taking care of the kids by myself, or maybe not so much taking care of them like on day to day, but making decisions, having to make those decisions by yourself. What school is best for them, and how to maneuver this and how to maneuver that, and should I do this? And yes, absolutely making decisions on your own. Especially if they're downrange to the point where you cannot reach them, which is common in SOF especially. There would be times where Jake would be just unreachable because he'd be out in the middle of nowhere in Cambodia, obviously no cell service, or he would be on some type of mission where we would not be able to talk. And that happens too in the regular Army, of course. But yeah, I would say maybe just the fact that you have to sometimes make those decisions for yourself. And so I would say that in order to strengthen, if you were a spouse or a girlfriend, in preparation for, make sure you have those conversations ahead of time.
Sure.
Like, how would you want me to handle this? Or, do what you think is best, or, get a feel for what you would think that your significant other would find appropriate if you thought you didn't know what to do.
Yeah. I mean, that trust has to be very strong.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about how you became a Gold Star spouse.
So, first of all, Jake and I had just had a baby. Our daughter was 3 months old, and training, of course. Another misconception, we were talking a little bit about how a lot of people think the Army is just like war and guns. More soldiers, this is something I wanted to touch on, more soldiers are actually killed in training than they are killed in action. So my husband was killed in training. It was at JRTC, and what he was doing was he was on a mission with an element from 7th Group and a National Guard element. And so the reason they do JRTC is to bring these different elements together and teach them, train them to work together, just in case they're working together downrange. Sure. Because downrange, you guys are all working together to do a mission, right? So that's what JRTC is. And so they were on a mission, and it was a longer mission, and he had messaged me a couple days prior before his death saying, I won't be able to talk to you for a little while, and I'll message you whenever I'm done. And it was at nighttime or very early in the morning. It was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And they were in a vehicle convoy, and there was a rollover. And my husband was one of several casualties, but he was the only one that was killed. And so I know a few of the guys from 7th Group one of them was very seriously injured. I met them later. But yes, my husband was the only one that was killed in the training accident. And this happened in 2019. In 2019, there were more rollover accidents than any other year in military, or I guess in Army history. More rollover deaths, I should say, which prompted a lot of families of these rollover victims to demand investigations into why all of this was happening, to include, were the vehicles sustainable, were they good enough, were they damaged from there was like this idea that some of the vehicles may have been malfunctioning or damaged because of being in Iraq or Afghanistan and being worn out. So there was a lot of investigations, I think, up to the congressional level. And some families had reached out to me and asked me, to be involved in this. And I just, at the time, was not really ready. But yes, a lot of rollovers in 2019, and my husband was one of the victims of that.
And it was a military vehicle. It's what we would call it, a tactical vehicle. Probably a Humvee would be my guess, or...
Yes, yeah. Okay. He was, he was in a military vehicle in uniform. And so my understanding is that these training missions are very intense, very high speed, and they treat them as if you are downrange, and it's
realistic as possible.
As realistic as possible. And speaking with people that were there, people that were part of this training mission, and just soldiers in general who've kind of explained to me what it's like, their adrenaline is through the roof, heart's pounding. They take it very seriously, and it's just very intense and high speed, and sometimes even more high speed than the real thing, because they want them to be prepared in case something happens in downrange. So they were coming off the training mission. Everyone was like, to my understanding, they were heading back, but they were driving. It was dark. Conditions were not ideal. They were driving under nods. Maybe they were going faster. Maybe they weren't. Yeah. There's been investigations into that as well. Years and years and years of investigations. But yes. So the convoy, my husband was in the third vehicle. And yes, they were all military vehicles. And the first one was fine. The second one tipped, and my husband's rolled several times. It wasn't just like a flip, it was like a several times roll. So my husband was ejected from he was in the rear passenger, so he was behind the passenger on the right. So somehow he fell out of his door, and even the guy in the turret was safe. He was hurt, but he did not fall out. And then there were people on the back. It was one that there's two in the front, two in the middle, and then the back is open. And the guys on the back, they actually fell off too.
I think maybe it was a cargo Humvee, you think? Yeah.
Something like that, okay. Yeah. So the guys in the back, I know one of them, or I guess both of them, were very seriously injured, but I ended up meeting one of the guys from 7th that was injured as well, and they were hurt for a while too. Yeah.
Okay.
How long did it take for you to be notified?
I found out around maybe 8:30 in the morning. 8 in the morning maybe. I had just gotten home from taking my kids to school, and so it was just me and the baby. And I remember I had just put her back in her swing, and she was going to take a nap, and somewhere between 8 and 9 probably in the morning. So just a matter of a few hours, yeah. My knock on the door was a chaplain, and it was Major, I think now Colonel, maybe? I think she's been promoted, Sarah Stockton. Mm-hmm. And at the time, Major Stockton, she was getting ready to take command of my husband's company. She was not in command yet, but she was just about to take command. So I've always kind of had some type of connection with her, because her very first order of business for her new company was to be my knock on the door. And I remember she was crying, and I mean, there's no amount of training that is going to make you be unaffected by having to tell me that. So yeah.
What was your reaction like?
So a couple weeks before my husband died, you guys will love this, training before training. So, always. So our daughter had just been born, and he had just gotten off paternity leave, and they went out into the field for a week here at Bragg, or Liberty, now Liberty, then Bragg. And he came home early, and he FaceTimed me, and it was at nighttime, and so I couldn't see his face. I could just see darkness. And he was like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, nothing, just fold laundry. And then all of a sudden the door opened and he surprised me. And when I got the knock on the door, we had like the glass that kind of makes it distorted. I saw uniforms, and in my head I thought he was surprising me again.
Oh.
But as soon as I opened the door, I knew.
Yeah.
I think every military spouse, that is the ultimate fear.
Yeah.
The death, the event, but also the knock on the door is the fear too. And those unexpected knocks, just like the what ifs, especially if your husband's gone. But I never, knowing what I know now, yes, absolutely, knowing that more soldiers are killed in training than they are in action. But at the time, it was just a shock. But yeah, as soon as I opened the door, I knew, and I fell down. And the chaplain came in and helped me up, and they sat with me for a while, and they just kind of encouraged me to stay still and calm down. And yeah, it's kind of a blur a little bit.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. How? Because you said that you had just taken the kids to school. How long did it take you to, be able to tell them?
So I don't remember how long before I left to get them, but I remember I kept saying, we just had a baby. And I remember Sarah and the chaplain just, saying, I know. And they were like, look, we think you're in shock. Like, just calm down. Like, they didn't want me to leave right away because I wanted to go get the kids from school and tell them. They didn't want me to leave right away. So I didn't, but I don't remember how long I stayed until I went and got them. And finally, I just kind of was like, I have to. Like, I just faced it. You know what I mean? And we kind of came up with a plan. It was probably a few hours because I want to say that they were like, okay, look, we'll go grab lunch or something really quick. But I remember coming up with some type of tentative plan to not tip the kids off as to what was going on. My kids are Army brats. I didn't know how much they knew about knocks on the doors and things like that, but I knew that they would know something. They are Army brats through and through. All of them have grown up in this life. So
how old were they at this time?
Okay, so at the time my oldest stepdaughter was 13, and then my next stepdaughter would have been, I think, 8 or 9.
So both old enough to
for sure.
Yeah,
and
to
then
understand it. Yeah.
7, 5, and 3 months. Yeah. So we had 5, all girls, 5 daughters. The youngest was 3 months, and the oldest was 13 at the time.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just said, like, park down the road a little bit, and when you see me, like, come back in, because I was terrified. I was terrified, and I needed their help. And I was just like, will you help me? Will you come in? Whatever. I didn't know if it would make things better, make things worse. I just knew that I was so scared. I was scared. So I went and got them, and when I went into the school, I told the principal. She was in the office, and the school knew us very well because I volunteered at the school all the time and helped out just doing various things, and our kids did after school activities. And I remember the principal, like, immediately crying. She knew my husband, she knew me, she knew the girls. Everyone was just like, whatever we can do. So they went and got the kids, and the kids were like, why are you here? And I didn't cry. I was like, well, one of my friends needed my help, and I just had to get you guys early from school. Everything's okay, And, sorry.
Yep.
And I held it together. I don't know how. I don't know if the kids thought something was wrong or just had no idea. Drove home. As soon as we walked in the door, I pretty much cracked.
Yeah.
And
on that familiar turf.
Yeah, like as soon as we opened the door, I just remember I kind of was like, girls, come here, come in the living room. And they sat down, and they knew.
They knew something was up.
They knew. they knew something was up, and I just cracked, and I told them, and I remember they all started screaming.
Yeah.
And pretty much right at the time, the chaplain and Sarah walked back in, and they just, I don't really remember what they said or did or how it played out, but then my mother-in-law called, and so they had sent someone to her house as well. So after I was notified, they basically were like, okay, you can put it out. And so they sent someone to her house as well. She called me shortly after, and then my husband's ex came over to talk to the kids and everything, and we just kind of talked, and it just went from there. Yeah.
Your in-laws they're still in the Midwest?
They are. They're in Kansas City.
And or are. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I know for my in-laws, they told me what happened. My mother-in-law was at work. My father-in-law had come home for lunch. So they didn't tell them for several hours. I think what happened was they told them after I left to tell the kids. My chaplain and my notification officer, who was then Major Stockton, said, okay, go ahead and tell his parents or whatever, because they were told pretty much in that window after I went to go get the kids. But my father-in-law had come home for lunch, and so he called my mother-in-law, and she came home, and they didn't really tell me their reaction. That's however they reacted, but I do remember they told me how my husband's grandparents reacted. Remember, I told you he was very close with his grandparents. They were the matron of honor and best man at our wedding. And he grew up down the road from like a street away. So very close with them. And they had already buried a grandchild,
right.
Many years prior. But still, that's a pain that no parent or grandparent should ever have to feel. So, I do remember that them like being concerned about like my grandpa or my grandfather-in-law like falling and my grandmother-in-law falling, something to that effect.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So what are the first few days like?
Honestly, a blur. I remember one of my biggest concerns was I could not eat. I could not keep anything down, and I just kind of stopped at that point. Yeah. And I was nursing my daughter at the time, and I was very worried about getting her the proper nourishment. So I just did the best I could. But I do remember the next few days were really a blur with just a lot of visitors. Mm-hmm. Someone from the CAC, the Casualty Assistance Office on post came, and of course I was assigned my CAO, my first CAO, who is now out of the Army, who I ended up becoming also very close with. And she kind of explained how they were going to do everything and what the unit was going to provide and what the military provides, what the VA provides, and all the benefits and the planning and everything. And it was really a blur.
It's probably a lot to take in.
It was a lot to take in.
Grieving, yeah.
Yeah, and then keep in mind I still had... So my stepdaughters did stay with me, and I had all 5 kids, and I had a 3-month-old baby, and all the things. So I was trying to, my number one focus was making sure the kids were okay. So I tried to do most of my talking with like my CAO and with whomever came while the kids were away. And so I tried to make things as normal as possible for them as much as they wanted to. So if they wanted to go to school, they were allowed to go to school. If they wanted to go to a friend's house, they were allowed to do that. So just to keep them busy. Yeah. I didn't want them to overhear things that might hurt them or traumatize them more. So I tried to keep them kind of away while I would have these conversations with my CAO. But basically, when a soldier dies, the military has this whole type of action plan for how to handle everything from the notification, which is like the first step, all the way to the burial and what they will provide if you want them to provide it. And so my casualty assistance officer, she was just quite literally had a checklist, and this is what we'll do, and what do you need me to do, and this is what you need to do, and what I need from you. And it was really just a blur of, let's do this, okay, sign. Yep. Let's do this, sign. And I do remember the 97th was absolutely incredible to me every step of the way. people were visiting. Do you need anything? Bringing food. They left like so as not to disturb me. I remember someone, I think it was Tanner's wife actually, left or set up like a cooler outside, put food in it for the kids. I wasn't eating, but the kids needed to eat. But yeah, they were incredible every step of the way. I remember one of my other big concerns was I was always like worried, where's Jake at? I wanted to know where he was every step of the way, what was happening with him, with his body. And I got updates all the time.
That's
every
good.
little bit movement he made, which might seem insignificant to someone, but to me it was like, no, I need to know where he's
That's
at.
all you have left. Yeah.
That's all I had left. I wanted to know where he was, and I was incredibly protective of him, and I still am. But I remember the 97th, it was like they took that seriously, and the guy that they basically had assigned to him and was with him and got his uniform set
Yeah,
up.
they'll have somebody that literally travels with him.
Yes.
Sometimes several, but at least one.
Yeah, Sentinel, I think they're
every step.
traditionally called, yes.
Yep.
So his Sentinel, updated me every step of the way. Every step of the way, yeah.
Well,
Where
I
he
mean,
was.
all things considered, I'm glad you had a good experience with all of that.
I am too. I know dozens and dozens and dozens of other widows, and I've heard some horror stories about the Army. I say the Army very broadly, but in some cases it's like units kind of fumbling these things, or maybe families not getting the treatment they think they deserve, or whatever the case. But I cannot say that about the 97th. They were nothing but amazing and supportive to me during that time, and gave Jake every honor that was due to him.
Is there a particular memory you have of, I guess maybe a specifically bad situation that you were in for that first, say, week or 2 weeks, or however long it was, that a specific kind of support that you needed was just right there immediately available? Whether it was chaplain support, or just emotional support, or help with the kids. Is there?
Yeah, my CAO, which she was someone that the 97th, she was in the brigade, assigned to me to go through the whole process with me. She's out of the Army now, but she did not know, I don't think she knew Jake. She may have crossed paths with him, but another CA individual. There were things that she did that she did not have to do, like she knew I wasn't eating and she knew I wasn't drinking, but she knew that I would have like a green tea from Starbucks, so she would show up with that. Anything to kind of encourage me. And then I remember I couldn't keep things straight. I was like, I don't know, what are we supposed to do next? And blah, 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 because I had to plan his entire funeral. Like every decision, I had to make all those decisions. Everything was introduced to me, and I had to kind of say yay or nay or sign off on it or whatever. So I had no idea what I was doing and what was next and what everyone needed. So she would text me after she would leave the house, which she visited every single day. She would text me at the end of the night and say, okay, this is what we're doing tomorrow, because she knew that I couldn't keep things straight.
Yeah.
So in the morning I would wake up and look at her text and these things. And I remember some of the texts would be, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to try to eat something, you're going to drink a cup of water before you go to bed. Things like that
Yeah.
she did not have to do. She did not have to be that to me. Later on, this happened in 2019. In 2020, when the pandemic happened, I don't know if you guys remember, but masks were like, nobody could get them at first. You
At
remember
first,
that?
right.
At
Yeah.
first, and now masks are,
Pervasive.
yeah, like, okay, whatever. But at first, everyone was like, I gotta have a mask, right? And I was able to get masks for all of the girls, but not for myself. And I wasn't able to get one for Everest. And again, this is before we knew anything, right? This was literally like day one. My CAO mailed me 2 masks that her mom had made. And, at the time, that meant everything to me. Yeah. So, but yes, very supportive. I remember that she was fielding calls for me, especially from the funeral home. It just kind of got to where it was just too heart-wrenching to talk anymore. And so I would tell her kind of what I wanted, what I needed, and she would kind of do the talking for me.
Yeah.
Even to, like, she talked to, like, TRICARE for me at one point, because I did not want to have to go over it again. So, yeah. Absolutely my CAO.
That's all that administrative and legal tasks you have to go through when one should be grieving, right? I mean, it's important, but is it,
Right, absolutely. Especially things like, because whenever you have health insurance through your sponsor, they're in charge of your plan. Well, when your sponsor dies, even now, he's still my sponsor. So my insurance still has his name on it, but I'm in charge of the plan now. So it's really weird, but when he first died, it was like all of the proving that he died. It was just the first few weeks especially, I just couldn't take it anymore. And she would literally like do some of that stuff for me. So
sometimes in the healthcare industry, God bless them, but sometimes when you're dealing with the admin side of it, they can be a little surly, which is not what you need in this moment.
Well, especially like Humana, you'd think like they would know the drill.
Yeah.
We're talking about soldiers here who do die. So
Right.
Well, I'm glad you had a good support system there.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I have been on that other end where what was it? Fumbled the ball? Is that what you said? So we'll go ahead and leave it at that.
Yeah,
I've seen that.
Unfortunately, yeah. And I'm not trying to knock other units, but I just will always like very much love the 97th for how they treated Jake, but for how they supported me in the aftermath. Even now, still support me.
So how do you keep Jake's memory alive, with your kids in particular?
So many ways. Well, for one, for lack of a better word, I guess, I have kind of a shrine. I have his uniforms in cases, and I have a picture of him and all of his awards and various things that he got for us on his travels, like we were discussing. He also did scuba diving, and so whenever he was scuba diving, he collected shells for us, and all of the treasures that he got us, I kind of keep out. Other ways, just always like talking about, do you remember this? Do you remember that? Oh, your dad did this. Your daddy did that. Especially with Everest too. Like I said, she was only 3 months old, and she's 5 now, and she absolutely knows who he is. Like if there's a picture of him, oh, that's my daddy. He's in heaven, or something like that. But it's been a challenge because, like recently, she started saying, "Let's go get him."
Yeah.
Like he's in heaven. Oh, okay, let's go get him. She's now like, well, I can't. Like, well, I know he's in heaven, but like, okay, how can we talk about this guy all the time? And she knows, like, we'll see pictures of him and her, and she'll say, "That's me, and that's my daddy. Let's go get him." You know what I mean? But she also knows every year, like I said, he's. So I buried him in Kansas City, where he's from. Our family has plots together. Every year we go and visit. And she knows that he's buried there too. And so I don't know how it works in her brain, but always telling stories about him, and the funny ones too. He played the ukulele.
As one does.
That's actually how he asked me to marry him. But all the kids have their own ukuleles as well. Yeah. Oh, another cool thing is a friend of mine had all of these, the girls all had their favorite animal. She had his voice put in these like stuffed animals of their favorite animals, so they have that as well. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I guess with the smartphones and all that, you have a lot of pictures and videos and things at your fingertips that in generations past didn't exist.
Yes, that's so true. Yeah, we're really lucky in that regard with all the technology we have. But pictures and memories and funny stories, and I mean, for me, like, some people don't like the idea of like a shrine. They think it's morbid, or maybe it makes things worse, but in my family, in my house, for us, it doesn't. For us, it's a good thing. It's just a reminder that he is still very much a part of our lives, and like especially like I said, for my daughter, I want her to know him. And so I feel like the best way for her to know him is to keep some of those things out and talk about it all the time. And I have recently started to tell her, because like I said, she's 5 now, so I think she's starting to understand more. He died when you were a baby. So now she knows he died when I was a baby, but that's really the extent of what she knows. She does know, she's an Army brat too. I mean, she's a Gold Star kid, but she knows soldiers, and she loves soldiers, and she knows paratroopers specifically. Like, she knows the difference between soldier and paratrooper. She knows paratroopers jump out of planes. And so I've tried to explain to her, your daddy in heaven, he was a paratrooper too. Yeah. And so, yeah, we talk about him all the time. All the time we talk about him. Yeah.
I think it probably helps that the kids were all of varying ages. So the eldest can help the youngest by saying, oh yeah, when you were a baby, when you were a newborn, I remember, daddy, rocking you to sleep or whatever it was. The older ones can help keep the memories alive for the younger ones.
Definitely rely on people who knew him to tell, their stories too. And lately, like, his friends especially, I'm like, you guys, I need you to tell these stories to her eventually. And then also my youngest daughter is very close with Jake's parents. Mm-hmm. Even though they live in Kansas City, we visit at least once a year, but sometimes more often. And she just absolutely loves Grandma and Grandpa. And so I think that's special too, that they'll be able to tell her more about him, things that I didn't know. Sure. I didn't know that side of him, so yeah.
That's good.
What, if you don't mind sharing, what's your favorite memory with Jake? If you would like to share,
I do not have a favorite. They're all my favorite.
Okay.
Every single one is my favorite.
That's fair. That's fair.
So I said he played the ukulele. He asked me how to marry him. He was in Cambodia. This is like the best Army story. This will just show you like the military life and all that it entails.
CA guys are a little weird too, so
they are. They're quirky, right? Smart, and they are like introverted extroverts. But he actually asked me to marry him when he was deployed. And he wrote me a song on his ukulele. And it was to the tune of Hey There Delilah by the Plain White Tees. Mm-hmm. But he said, hey there Jessica, will you marry me, basically. But a whole song with all of his own lyrics. And he sent me a video. And I didn't watch it right away. I was at the gym. So meanwhile, he's deployed, freaking out. Yeah, thinking she said no. I don't know what to do, And finally he called me and he was like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, nothing, babe. I just left the gym. I'm about to go through Starbucks, get a coffee or whatever. And he's like, could you please watch the video I sent you now? I thought it was just another ukulele video. You know what I mean?
Just kind of roll your eyes a little bit.
Yeah. The most recent one, I think he had, his sister had celebrated a birthday or something. And he had sent me the video of him singing happy birthday to her. So I just thought it was him playing around on his ukulele again. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll watch it when I get home. No, you need to watch it now.
No.
So I was in the Starbucks drive-thru after I had just left the gym, and started crying. Said yes, and then he was like, okay, I picked out my ring because he was in Cambodia. So what we did again was I went to Zales and I FaceTimed him and I was like, I like this, and this, and so we kind of agreed on the one, and so military.
I imagine the staff is pretty accommodating for that kind of stuff.
Yes, and they thought it was adorable. And it just it just goes to show that separation. It's just a reality in our lives, and just part of it. Yeah, but every there's just no favorite. Every single one is my favorite.
That's fair.
Yeah, I love everyone.
Is there something specific that you miss about him, something that he used to do for you? Or something that he used to say.
That's gotta be hard to pick, right?
Again, everything. You asked me earlier, what it was that made me finally give him a chance, and it was that persistence. One of the reasons I loved him so much was his patience. I would be freaking out about, who knows, nothing sometimes. and he was always just cool. And I've heard that from people in his unit as well, how the most stressful situation, Jake was the calm guy. He was like, everything's going to be fine, calm. So I miss that patience in him. I absolutely miss seeing him interact with the kids, and something that breaks my heart is the memories that aren't even real. The ones that I've created in my head, the memories that don't exist, that would have happened. Like my husband loved sports, right? From the Midwest, you love sports, even I do. And my 5-year-old, she did learn to play soccer last year with Fort Bragg, and it was sad for me. It was like heartbreaking for me because he wasn't there to coach her.
Yeah.
And I remember when we found out we were going to have our 5th daughter, no boy, he said, he goes, well, I'll just be a softball coach instead of baseball.
Yeah.
Right?
There you go.
And that was him, that positivity. But, some of the things that I miss the most are the things that haven't happened, the things that didn't get a chance to happen like that. But day to day, just him, his humor and playing the ukulele, and he would make up silly, stupid songs, and he would play pranks on the kids all the time. And when he was deployed, and I know this is rare too, if he had a free second to call me or FaceTime me, he would every single time. We talked constantly, and I really think that's another reason that our marriage was so strong, was because we did really invest our time into each other and our relationship. But I miss everything. Yeah. Again, there's no one thing. Everything. There is not a whisper of him that I don't miss. Even the things that annoyed me, I miss deeply now. Yeah. Yes, I remember a few months.
That is a weird thing about human nature, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. I remember a few months after he died, I was cleaning our bedroom, and he was notorious for not putting dirty clothes in the basket, but next to the basket.
We do that on purpose.
Yeah, I see the look on your face. You're like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. My wife would agree.
No idea.
We do it on purpose.
I found a sock under the bed, and I remember I actually made a post on Facebook about it saying, ladies, don't stress about the socks anymore. Don't stress about those things, because you will never know how much you might treasure that dirty sock under the bed later. I mean, this was just a couple months after he died, So I miss everything. Yeah.
That perspective is important.
Absolutely. It's, don't sweat the small stuff, because that small stuff had me bawling my eyes out and wishing he was there to drive me crazy. You know what I mean? Yeah, absolutely. I miss him driving me crazy.
So we ask all our guests this question, but in your case, it's going to be particularly special. But would you do it all over again?
In a heartbeat. Absolutely. If I could change the outcome, I would.
Of course.
But I would do it in a heartbeat. I thought about this the other day. In the last 5 years since Jake has been gone, there have been many challenges related to his death. Absolutely related to his death. Things that I've been through or had to manage that I would not have if he were still here. And I've found myself frustrated, but I've always remembered that loving him is the easiest thing I've ever done. And even now, and I said earlier, I'm protective of him. I am, and I also have absolutely vowed to carry his torches forever. And people in my life, there are people who have been you need to move on, or you need to do this, or don't say you'll never get married ever again. You're too young to say that. And I'm this is my choice. I choose, I can't live without him, so I choose not to live without him. I keep him alive in my present now. But yes, I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. I remember him saying, when he re-upped indefinitely when he was in Cambodia, and he was completely joking when he said this, but he was what if I just get out of the army? and I go do this. Ha ha ha, re-up. It was just like a joke.
Yeah.
Maybe I would have been like, why don't you just get out of the Army? But he wouldn't have. He wouldn't have. There's no way. I also remember a couple years ago, maybe like 2 years ago, one of his, a guy that he was on a team with at one point, his wife had reached out to me and said that he was struggling a lot with like survivor's guilt. They did not have any children. My husband was the father of 5. And he struggled a lot with that and was saying, he wished it was him. And I shut that down. Absolutely not. My husband, even if he had known it was going to be him, would never have allowed anyone to take his place. That's just not the nature of a soldier.
Right.
So, I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. I would, in a heartbeat. I'm glad my ex sucked, and I'm glad his ex did too.
It's the adage about the broken and windy road that leads you to the right person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
There's never going to be a shortage of Gold Star families.
Unfortunately.
So, do you have one piece of advice, just one piece of advice that you can give for any current or future Gold Star family members? Not necessarily spouses, maybe kids, brothers, sisters, parents. If you could tell them one thing.
Yeah. So, bearing in mind that everyone manages grief differently or accepts it on a different timeline or does things differently to remember or honor or whatever, I would say give yourself a lot of grace and time and space to learn what works for you to get you through like those hard times. Like for me, it's, again, I've had some people say like, why don't you move on? Why do you keep that shrine up? Why do you do this to yourself? That's my choice to keep him alive presently every single day. Maybe that doesn't work for someone else. Find what works for you to get you through this. And if that's running marathons in their honor, then do that. If that is, doing retreats with TAPS or an organization, then do that. If that is sitting down and having, talks with other veterans or people that knew your soldier, then do that. But give yourself grace and time to figure that out. And I will not say that grief does not lessen. Grief stays the same. The person grows around the grief. So when it first happens, it's just you're touching it all the time. But eventually you get bigger around it and the grief just touches sometimes. So just give yourself time and space to get there.
Is there, outside of the military, outside of the DoD, is there an organization or a support group or an element that, whether government or not, a civilian group, what have you, that helped you, that you would like to give some credit to?
There are so many. So for me specifically, there are 2 that I want to talk about. And I also want to point out that every situation is different. So a lot of organizations will support any and every Gold Star family, which Gold Star, by the way, means that your soldier died on active duty. And then there's differences. There's KIA, there's KIT, there's line of duty, there's not line of duty. Yep. But if your soldier died while serving on active duty, that's Gold Star. So some will support all of that. Some will support maybe 82nd Airborne only veterans or families. Some will support special operations. So my husband was special operations. So there's an organization called Special Operations Warrior Foundation that I absolutely love. And what they do is they provide post-secondary education support to children. And last year, they recently started providing support to kids K through 12 for private school.
Nice. Okay.
And previously, and they still do this as well, they provided like for pre-K and Montessori. So Everest actually started going to Montessori school when she was 3.
Nice.
Special Operations Warrior Foundation completely covered her tuition and still covers her tuition for pre-K as well.
Yep.
So absolutely love them. Again, they're specifically for special operations families. Another organization is called the Tunnel to Towers Foundation.
We're familiar with them.
Yes.
Absolutely love the Tunnel to Towers Foundation, and as you guys know, they support not only do they support Gold Star family members, but they support
First responders.
first responders, and they started specifically with 9/11 families in honor of their brother who was killed in the towers, Stephen Siller. But they supported my family a few years ago, and it was completely life-changing for me. It took off an incredible financial burden. So yeah, absolutely those two. But in general, TAPS is a really great organization. They do retreats all the time for widows, for children. They aim also to get you connected to other people, other Gold Star families to build.
Can you explain what TAPS is?
So TAPS is an organization that supports Gold Star families. And so TAPS, after the song TAPS, but it's called the Tragedy Assistant. Oh, I can't stand. I don't know what the P stands for.
Yeah, I can't help you, I'm afraid, but
Tragedy
there's a cute
Assistance
acronym, of course, yes.
Program, maybe. Gosh, if somebody from TAPS hears this, I'm sorry. I should know this too. I actually just signed up to be a peer mentor through TAPS.
Oh, nice.
And gosh, don't gig me on that. Anyway, TAPS is a great organization, but they support Gold Star families, and they do retreats, and they do workshops and trainings. And again, one of their biggest goals is to get families together to get to know each other, so you have support through those other families as well.
Families that are going through the same thing.
Families that are going through the same thing, yeah. And they support you forever. Like, it doesn't end. Now, some of these organizations, the support ends when you're 18, or I shouldn't say the support ends, but some of the services they provide end. Yeah. But with TAPS, it's forever. It's forever. And another interesting thing about TAPS is some of these organizations, they will only provide support if you are married to the service member, but TAPS will also, like if you were a girlfriend or a fiance, they will support you as well. So I think that's special because I have met a few Gold Star fiancés who it was quite heartbreaking for them when they couldn't get the pass to Arlington like other family members could. I understand why. I understand from the perspective of like DOD, but from the perspective of someone who was once a fiance before I was a spouse, I love that TAPS supports them as well.
Yeah. I had a fiance while I was in Iraq, so
yes,
I know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Jake was in Cambodia when I was his fiance, and I mean, gosh, things can kick off.
A lot can go wrong very fast.
He carried a weapon whenever he was in the Philippines, so that's so many organizations, but TAPS is one that comes to mind that is broad for everyone. Gold Stars.
It's great.
I'm glad that our country, but has learned a lot of, we call it scar tissue, right? Learning things the hard way after World War I, after World War II, Korea, Vietnam. I think people in our age are the beneficiaries of a lot of mistakes and lack of support that existed before us. So all things considered, I'm glad that we have those kinds of resources available.
Yeah, it's very true. It's never going to be perfect, but closer to perfect.
A lot of the resources that became available to Gold Star specifically started with women from the Vietnam era, fighting for widows, and still to this day fighting for things for us. So, yeah, absolutely. Nod to all the Gold Stars before me for fighting for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, is there anything else you would like to share with us before we wrap up here?
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about Jake.
Of course.
It's one of my favorite things to do. I really appreciate you remembering him especially, and inviting me.
Well, thank you for your service and your sacrifice, and of course, same likewise for Jake and the rest of your family. So.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I think people are going to learn a lot
I hope
from sitting down and talking with you.
I hope so. Thanks.
Hey, baby, I love you very much. And I can promise this won't be perfect, but it'll be 100% just for you. I love you. Hey there, Delilah, what's it like in New York City? I'm 1,000 miles away, but girl, tonight you look so pretty, yes you do. Times Square can't shine as bright as you, I swear it's true. Here goes. Hey there, Jessica, you once told me that you're perfect and could woo you with this music and make you feel so special all the time. This is my attempt to write those lines and make you mine. Oh, it's what you do to me. 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 And what you do to me. Hey there, Jessica, I'm getting off the plane right now, 9,000 miles away from you, and now I want to see those gorgeous eyes. They light up just like fireflies, I tell no lies. Hey there, Jessica, we are finally together, just believe me when I tell you that I love you until forever, I promise you. Forever I'll be stuck to you like glue, I swear it's true. Oh, it's what you do to me. 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 What you do to me. Yeah, here we go. You take my breath away and I love you, I have to say my world is better whenever you are near. Jessica, yeah, you know me, and now I'm down on bended knee, I'm begging you to please be my wife. Honey, I can promise you that if you let me marry you, I'll choose you first every single day. So what do you say? Hey there, Jessica, it's 2067, 50 years have passed together in what's simply been heaven on earth. I hope we have another 50 years, they'll be full of joyful tears. Hey there, baby doll, this song's for you, and only you. Oh, it's what you do to me. Oh, it's what you do to me. Oh, will you marry me? Oh, will you marry me? Will you marry me? Will you marry me? Seriously. Serious question. I love you, baby. I hope you say yes.